So in this video we're going to be mainly taking a look at the topology brush inside of ZBrush for generating topology directly on top of a model that we already have. So to get to that brush you just tap B and then T, and then you can find topology here. The hotkey for that, it looks like it's mapped to O, so you tap O. Once you have this, you can turn symmetry on and off with this brush by just tapping X. And you can see the way that this brush works. Let me draw out some lines really quick. You draw a line coming down here and a line down here, and if you cross it at the top and the bottom to create a quad, it actually draws geometry for you. Now if you hold down Alt, it's possible that you can erase these different overhanging pieces of wire there for that. And if you want to extend off, you can just get kind of close to this point here like that, and you can click and you can draw off of these actual points and add new quads to that. So you can hold down Alt, you can get rid of these points. If there's a bunch of points and pieces of wire that you want to get rid of, just hold down Alt and then just drag on the open part of the model. So the other thing that's kind of cool about this is after you have some base geo kind of set up like this, and we can extend off of this, and I'll just push this a little bit further out, is that you can just quickly just draw right down the center of this and it'll add new splits for you. So you can see I'm trying to make my geometry nice and evenly distributed as far as the size of the polygons. And I could just go ahead and draw through here. I can draw like this. I'll draw here. And I can just go all the way through on this section and just hold on Alt and click and draw on the model and get rid of all those extra points there. So you can see it's going to build up geometry for you pretty quickly. My only complaint with this tool is I'd like to take these points and move them around after they're created. So I'm going to show you guys how we can actually do that, but we have to leave this tool in order to do that. In order to leave the tool and actually produce some geometry, we just have to click and tap on our model once, and you can see it's going to make this geometry for us. And if I turn on the polyframe, you can see how it's actually extruding out the surface on this and giving a thickness to it. That's coming from this right here. Let me hit undo, and if we want to change that thickness, we just tap S, and it's tied to our brush size, the draw size here. So if I make this really large and if I click on it, you can see that it's going to really extrude that surface out pretty far for us. So depending on the thickness that you're looking for, I'm just going to hit undo. I'm just going to go ahead and make my brush size a bit smaller like this. Tap once, and you can see the thickness that it's going to generate at that point for me. You can see it's not actually thick enough, and it's actually colliding with some of the geo that we have here. So you can either fix that by hand a little later, or you could actually increase the size. I'm going to hit undo, and I'm going to take my draw size, tap S, and drag this down to 1. And if I click now, it should give me something that has no thickness to it, like that, and it should just give me a flat plane. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. I don't want the thickness part because I'm going to show you how to move these points around. We have to get this model separated from the main model that we started on. In order to do that, we just go to Subtool, and then we go to Split, and they've made this cool thing. You can see the rest of the model is masked out except for this piece of geometry that we made. So we can do split on masked points. When we do that, it's going to give us this new piece of geometry that you see here. So here's our geometry that we're working with. I'm going to turn on the polyframe, and it's made a flat plane. We could have made it with a thickness, but we didn't because I want to show you how to take this and actually move it around on the surface. Okay, so I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to clone just this piece because I'm going to get it into this area with all of our different models we're going to choose from, and you're going to see how I'm going to use another resurfacing process that we looked at in some earlier videos with the Z-sphere method, and we're going to use this geometry to actually fill in all the geo that we're looking for to create a mesh. So it'll be a little more clear after you see this process. I'm going to go ahead and take this, I'm going to clone it, it's going to put it into the area right up here, and you can see that. This is the piece of geometry. I want to go back to this because this is the piece of geometry that I'm going to say is my model that I want to resurface or build a surface off the top of. And from our earlier video, we looked at making a Z-sphere. So we go ahead and say append, and you can find a Z-sphere and put it on there. Then you actually select the Z-sphere like this, and I want to make sure that model that I was working with is visible. So everything else is hidden in my subtools except for this piece, and that's pretty easy. You just hold on Shift and you can turn everything on just by holding down Shift, or you can turn everything off by holding Shift and clicking on that eye icon. So everything's hidden, and I'm going to turn on the visibility of that one piece that I care about up here with this right here like that. The next thing I'm going to do is scroll on down to the topology area, and this is the same method that we looked at before. We go to topology, and we would say edit topology if we want to start drawing Z-sphere skeletons on here to actually start resurfacing this. But what we can do is actually say select topology, and you remember we cloned this piece off. We can actually select that piece like this, and we can say edit topology. I'm going to put it back on perspective mode, and then I'm going to put this on move, and you can see we can actually move the points on here and affect that. I'm going to hit undo real quick and just make sure I have symmetry turned on. So I'm going to tap X, and you can see now we've got these pieces here. So I can click and drag and draw these things out, and we're back to that same method that we looked at earlier for affecting things. So I can tap S and make my draw size larger if I want to move these things around and kind of slide the geometry around a little bit better like this, and it is conforming to that surface. So I can drag this up like this at this point, and depending on if you want to affect a few points or a lot of points is going to have a big effect on how big that draw size is for your brush. So just keep that in mind whenever you're actually moving these things around. So I'm trying to get just a little bit better of a fit for this model, kind of what I'm looking for here, and making a cool shape. I want this to feel a little bit more rounded, so I'm going to take these corner points and push those in a little bit like this, and I'll pull this out to kind of give a little bit of sense of rounding right and through there. Okay, so again, from that that earlier video, if we wanted to put a split down here, if you remember, you hold down Control and you can click a point here, and you would have to maybe click from here to here to do that. But I'm just going to let you refer back to the older video if you want to see this process. I just want to mainly show you how to use the topology brush, get some geometry made, and then if you want to tweak it even further like what I'm doing, this is a method that you can do that with. We also looked at, if you tap A, that's going to give you your preview mesh, and we can turn on polyframe. At that point we can go to adaptive skin and put our density down to 1 and see the actual geo that we will be getting. And if we turn on transparency, we can see that. If we turn off preview and we go to topology, there is a skin thickness. So that same thing that we had going on with our brush size with the topology brush and in doing the extrusion and getting a thickness for that, here's where we can get that thickness here. So we'll try 0.25 and just see maybe what that gives us. So if we tap A, that puts us in the preview mode again, and you can see the thickness that we're getting. Definitely want something a lot larger than that, so let's try 0.1, tap A, and it's getting better. I'm going to turn off this transparency so we can see maybe what's going on here. And it looks like it's doing some kind of odd flipping thing over here. It's probably because I had symmetry turned on. I'll go ahead and I'll show you how we can fix that up. That's not a big deal. So I'm happy with this geometry, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say under adaptive skin, make adaptive skin. So it's going to make a new piece of geometry right up here in our area up here. And now I can go to subtool, and I can just go back to this piece of geo that I was working with, and that should be the only thing that's visible in my stack. I'm going to go ahead and append, so I'm going to add that piece of geometry that we just made, this piece right here. And you can see this part is flipped, and it's not doing what we want it to do, so we'll select it. So I'm going to go to deformation, I'm going to go mirror that across, and then we looked at how we can go to geometry, we can go to modify topology and say mirror and weld, and now we're going to mirror this across here like that. So now we've got the same exact geometry on both sides. The other thing that's kind of cool about this process that we looked at for generating geometry this way, and also with the topology brush, is whenever it extrudes out, it actually gives us a polygroup for the front, for the back, and for the sides on this. So when we hit Control D to add subdivision levels to our model, so it would be the same thing as hitting divide here, it also puts some creasing on there, so you can see as we divide the model up, this is what it's going to do for us. So it makes some nice hard edge kind of panels for us. I'm going to hit undo to get back all the way to the very beginning of that. Now if we step up in our subdivision levels, you can see how it's rounding these corners. So I'm going to show you real quick how we can preserve those corners. So I'm going to go here. I just want to make sure I've got the same geo going across. And basically, if we turn on the polyframe, you can look along the edges here, and it's got this like kind of double edge thing. That's ZBrush automatically, when it generates this topology, puts creasing on these edges to hold the nice hard edges for you, which is pretty cool. But we're going to change a little bit of the functionality on that. So I'm going to go under Geometry, and then we've got Crease, and we can open up Crease. And we'll take a look at making creases. We're going to uncrease all right now, which just removes any of the creasing information. So you can hit Control D, and you can see what's going to happen to the geometry when we remove the creasing information. That's what it looks like. We could use this crease polygroups. So if we hit that, it's going to crease our top, our sides, and our bottom. If we hit Control D, that's going to be very similar to what we had before. So using that functionality, I want to hold maybe this corner here and this corner here. In order for me to do that, I have to isolate the visibility of this piece right here, like that. And I'm going to make that into a new polygroup. I can hit Control W, and it's just going to give me a polygroup for whatever is visible. And I should have had symmetry turned on when I did that. Let me go ahead and just drag that again. Hit Control W. Now I've got both of these pieces will have that information on it. So we could hit this crease polygroups again, and it's going to crease this edge here, and this edge, the top and the back. If we hit Control D, you can see how it's going to hold that edge. So that's a possibility. The other thing we could have done is you can crease visible. So whatever's visible here, just like our polygroup, if we crease that, it's going to do the same exact thing as us hitting that polygroup. It's going to hold these edges. So I'm going to uncrease all, get rid of all the creasing information, and then talk real quickly about this crease level. This says saying it's going to hold the crease level if you hit the divide button up to 15 levels for subdivision levels. It'll hold that crease for that. We could set this to something like 3, so it's going to hold the crease level as we go 3. Let me actually put creasing on there. So let's crease the polygroups, and it's going to put the creasing on there, and now it's going to say we're going to divide once, twice, 3 times, and then the 4th time it's going to release that creasing and actually start to round the corners a little bit, which gives a nice kind of bevel kind of look. So depending on maybe the look that you're going for, you might want to mess around with this crease level here. So there's 2 different ways of building thickness and paneling on here. So it's possible that you could do this once to get this shape. You could keep working on this. You could go back to the methods that we were looking at before, as far as using slice curve and actually slicing this geometry up. So we could delete lower like this. We could use the slice curve. Let me draw this out real quick, holding on Control and Shift, adding a point, and then slicing through that. And then we could go ahead and mirror and weld that to get it the same on both sides. Then we could use some of our different panel loops options and things like that. So this is just a nice way to get some shape kind of going off of a particular model. So we've looked at, there's many different ways to kind of get here. This way is like pretty darn clean, and you can pretty much lay out the topology exactly like the way that you want for these different shapes. But this is just the beginning stage, and then we've looked at those other videos on how to take this and keep pushing it forward and keep detailing this out even further. But I think I've shown you a pretty good method of generating topology in a lot of different ways, and then getting it to a final stage where you've got a really nice high quality kind of look to things as well.